Ladies and gentlemen, those who are joining us are very welcome to our session. I, Beauty Arthur, is today's host of the session, and today we have an awesome speaker. Not only an awesome speaker, an awesome founder we have with us, and this is none other than Miss Noreen Hayat, who is the co-founder and CEO of Taste Financial Services, and she has done amazing job in the company, and I personally know her, and she is such energetic and active person I have ever met in my life, and she has done almost everything in her company. So actually, I am no one who can describe her in some few words. So I would like to invite Miss Noreen Hayat in our program. So let's welcome Noreen Hayat.
Oh my God.
Hi,
Hi,
Noreen.
Beauty. Thank you so much for such a generous introduction.
No, okay. So at first, Noreen, can you say a little bit about yourself to our audience so that they get to know who you are and what you are doing?
Absolutely. So I am co-founder at Neobank in Pakistan. It's called Tejas Financial Services. And Tejas is a fully digital financial institution that is aimed at providing basic financial services to the unbanked and underbanked people in Pakistan. And what we're doing is we provide these services without any friction, all through a smartphone app. The purpose of TASE really is to address the financial inclusion need of Pakistan. The issue is over 150 million people in Pakistan do not have access to basic financial services. That's over 70% of the population. And what we have tried to do with this is provide a complete slate of financial services that addresses the entire financial journey of the masses. So this includes nano loans. These are small loans up to 1,000 rupees. That's $100. And we provide these loans without any collateral or any credit history requirements within a matter of minutes. It's literally 10 minutes for a new user, 2 minutes or even less for a repeat user. And we provide these loans by understanding their digital footprints. And we have algorithms that actually understand smartphone data on the basis of which we assign credit scores. Now, that's one part of what we are doing. Then we're also providing savings solutions. And when I say savings, we do not provide savings the way conventional banks provide savings. We provide savings the way a conventional Pakistani or a common man would actually save. And a common man does not save in a bank. A common man either saves at homes, these are under mattresses and jars. We know how it is in emerging markets. And that's over 60% of the population. We have about $43 billion currency in circulation that is actually not in the banking system. Then a couple of other very common modes of informal savings are, as we call them in Pakistan, committees, and globally we call them money pools or Raskas. So we are digitizing Raskas, and the purpose of that is to get more people from the informal savings schemes to formal savings. And I think one product that I'm really excited about is fractional gold savings. So gold is an integral part of our cultural heritage, and in South Asia, we save a lot in gold. So we decided that we will provide people the opportunity to save in gold as low as 100 rupees. That's not even a dollar. So people can come and build their gold savings, and we this is the product that will be launching very soon. And ultimately, we've also launched insurance. That's the third vertical. And in the future, we plan on launching investments. So that's a complete slate of financial services that we're providing.
Excellent. You have described your ventures in a good way. Hopefully, our audience got to know actually what you are doing through your this financial services. As you know that most of our female-led businesses actually they do not want to go for technological things. Sometimes they're afraid that can I do that? That's why they go and use traditional business models, or they go for selling something like clothes or giving just restaurants. But how this thing about fintech came to your mind? Why did you go into that fintech market? What was in your mind happening that I should go over there and use grab this opportunity?
Well, usually to begin with, I'd say every woman who's trying to make a difference in whatever way, whether it's tech or not, hats off, because I think it takes a lot of courage and a lot of hard work to make a difference in whatever way, whether it's clothes or even a non-tech industry. But for me, I was fortunate enough to have been in this very, I think it's a fledgling and the upcoming industry as well. And it actually dates back to when I started my career actually. And in the earlier years, I was working with a credit rating agency. I was a credit rating specialist. And one of the sectors that I was a specialist for was the microfinance sector. Now, in Pakistan, the microfinance sector was created a little over 2 decades ago. And the mandate of the sector was poverty alleviation and still is. Now, when I was rating the sector, I actually had a chance to look at the various microfinance institutions and banks that we have, and the processes and procedures that they're following. And I think luck had it. I also had a chance to work with a campaign called the Smart Campaign. And the Smart Campaign is a campaign that works under the Center for Financial Inclusion. It's a World Bank initiative with Axion, and they work on client protection principles. And so I had the chance to conduct some experiments, some assessments on the field, with the people in the microfinance industry. I think during our research, I actually got the chance to first-hand observe what poverty means. And, it was actually, it was a moving experience for me because during that course, you actually see the impact or the implications that lack of finance can have on people's lives. To lack of opportunities for education, compromised health, and emergencies, which actually lead to debt traps where generations remain stuck in the poverty cycle. And when we were actually exploring, we saw that the microfinance institutions, although they've really tried to make an impact and they've done a great job, but there still have been challenges around them in achieving scale and also in achieving operational efficiencies. And some of the main reasons were because the field officers' caseloads, we call them, the loans that they give out in a month, were low compared to regional averages, and that's primarily because of operational inefficiencies that they had. Another issue that was very, very alarming, and still, the microfinance sector is criticized of, is high interest rates. Now, people who do not understand or haven't seen the sector probably might not know that, most microfinance institutions do not charge high interest rates because there are high margins here. They do so because they have very high operational costs and at times high defaults that they have to pass on to the customers. So, when we were actually studying this, we realized that, the best way to address both these concerns of operational efficiency, the inefficiencies that ultimately trickle down into high interest rates, is to make the credit disbursement process seamless. And to do that, the best way is to use technology. And so, we created a digital field application. It was more of a B2B model. And the aim of that was to completely digitize the credit disbursement process. And that's how, the evolution came in, and we actually evolved that into Thales, because that became from a B2B to a B2C model. And we decided to create our own financial institution, which was actually based on tech. And, that's now it's history, and, we're still evolving, still learning, and still trying to make an impact.
Yes, it's actually a history because that you have done in your country, no one had done earlier. So definitely it is also an inspiration for us as well that we can do such thing in our country as well, or we can make a collaboration with you guys so that we can have a more impact on the society. So
Absolutely.
just beginning with this one, at this point, I have another question to you. Actually, as you have started this technological company, so what are the resources have you found most useful for you? And we, what, actually already you have mentioned that you have a group number of community people, those who will be using this financial services. So actually, if I ask that if any other countries actually want these services, what community group you are looking for that those can actually take these services from your company, and what are the resources that you have found helpful when you have started your business?
Well, I think beauty. There are lots of pieces that come together for any company, and most a technology oriented company, to be successful. And I think you pointed out very well. I think partnerships is key here, and I don't say this because because I think a lot of people are now talking about partnership and collaborations, but you really, when you start getting into the space, you've got the incumbents, which are actually who have been in the industry for the longest while, and then you have these new age fintechs coming along, and newer companies who could definitely benefit from these incumbents, who have actually achieved scale, and they have economies that one could actually benefit from. So I think, if I am to talk about only to begin with locally, we do believe, and the vision of Days is to be a platform, and we do that through partnerships. And so we have already, and we will continue to partner with banks, with payment providers, with insurance companies. Then we have various consumer-oriented businesses, telcos. So these actually sit very well in the overall business model, and are the purpose or the aim that we're trying to achieve as well. And I think, when you talk about support, and I think because fintech is still a very, very nascent industry in Pakistan, there's a long way to go. The support of the regulator and the government becomes even more so important. And I'd say, the regulators here are really trying to bring in those changes in a very responsible manner. And I think they'll continue to, they would have to continue to do so, and understand how things are operating in global markets where fintech has actually achieved a lot of success. So I think that will continue to happen. And I think last but not the least, the space does call for a lot of investments, particularly in the earlier stage. And what we've seen is, you do see investments, probably VC funds coming into companies that have actually achieved some form of traction. Maybe Series A, post Series A, but there's still very limited funding that's coming on for very early stage, and then growth stage companies. So I think we do need more interest coming in and more support in terms of funding, because I think Pakistan definitely is this is the time to invest in Pakistan. It's really that tipping point where right now, the funding to valuations in Pakistan are still lower than maybe other parts of the world. And because we have a great potential here, we have a population of about 220 million people, and I think there's so much potential here. You talk about smartphones. We are now nearing 90 million smartphone users. So we have all the building blocks in place for this industry to flourish. And I think now is the time for all of these pieces to come together. But I think it will definitely take time till we can reach a point where we could say that we've stabilized.
Yes, thank you so much. As you were talking about the funding for the startups. As my next question comes to you is that, have you got any funding, or what are the things we need to have when we are approaching to an investor?
Yes. So, Beauty, we did raise funding. We raised funding from a very seasoned group of investors. A couple of them are Flourish Ventures, which previously was known as Umedia Network, and then Axion. Both of them are they are one of the most renowned investors in their spaces. Axion in the microfinance space, Flourish in the impact investment space, and they both came to Pakistan for the first time. So we raised a seed round from them, and a sponsor, which is Planet N. So they actually invest in tech-led companies in Pakistan. So we've been lucky to have raised funding from a very, very dynamic group of investors. And I think we've been in talks with many. We're still in the process of raising our next round of funding. And what we've learned with time is, number one, to begin with, I think it's very important to have a purpose. What purpose is your company or your idea really meeting? and that purpose should bring some sort of impact, whatever space that might be. So I think that's definitely to begin with the most important thing. But I think one could never stress on this enough, and I'm sure everyone hears this from everyone around, that the team really matters, and it actually does, because at the end of the day, it's whatever the idea is, it's the team that's going to really use that investor money for the best advantage of the funds that are put into it. So yes, I think then the team is really important. I think how you actually execute is then key, because ideas everyone can come up with. At the end of the day, it's all about execution. So yes, I think that's for me the maybe the two most important things when you're actually pursuing funding.
Excellent. You have pointed out the great things. You have to know about your team, and you have to be very cautious about choosing your team members. My next question is related to this one. How you actually find the team members, and how team members can influence in your business, either in success or in the failure? Because you know that most of the happens that we make our partners actually with just emotional thing, that either family members or my friends would be my co-founder and founder. But is it helpful? If it is helpful, how much, or how we should actually choose our partners in our startup or ventures?
See, I think I was very, very lucky with my co-founders. So when I began my first company was with a friend of mine actually. But I think what mattered the most at that time was that we shared the same vision and the same passion. I think I was very, very lucky, because that's something that's very difficult. So definitely, when you do decide to even start with a friend, I think, or anyone that I think that element of having a shared vision, shared passion, and I think that trust element is very, very important, because you literally, it's like, because starting a company is like starting a family, and until and unless you just can't trust the people that you're starting with blindly, you will struggle going forward, because you should be able to just completely rely blindly on that person, because there will be times when either one of the co-founders cannot be working on each and everything, so you need to be able to trust and know that they bring in those core competencies that maybe you don't have. So complementary set of skills is also very important. So then, and I think the third co-founder that ultimately came on board was Nadeem Hussain, he's the pioneer in microfinance in Pakistan. I think I really can't thank my stars enough, because we were lucky enough to have found him as a co-founder. And I think definitely you need people who complement your skills and share a vision. And ultimately, that trust element is also very, very important.
Actually, you are actually lucky enough to have such founders in your company. Okay, but you know that most of us are not lucky enough. They actually fall behind. Okay, so at that point, do you have any suggestion for that one? That if you do not have a good co-founder right now, how you can actually develop your business model? How you can find another partners and so on? Do you have any suggestion?
I think, well, the best part is that, with the world becoming so connected, you've got various social media platforms where one can actually look for co-founders. And I think even people that you haven't met or known before, and they can be from any part of the world. Because, for example, if you talk about data science and tech, I think Pakistan is still evolving. So a lot of the team members that we've gotten on board are not from Pakistan. We have some remote teams where we find talent, and we've found some very good management level team members from outside of Pakistan. So, and I think that happens through networking, using the social media platforms. I think just try to get in touch with people and put yourself out there on social media channels as much as you can. But I do understand it's not easy to find the right skill set, because when we've done our hiring processes as well, it's definitely been a challenge to find people who share even the same values, because I think for me, values and ethics really do matter. And that's how we also gauge whether or not this person who joins the company will be a good fit or not. So I think try to connect and try to just speak as much as you can before you even try to onboard them. See if there are any. I think number one is if you found someone, there can be. I think your gut really tells you a lot. So trust your instincts and try looking for complementary skill sets. People who would actually help you. If you at the end of the road you will need people who bring in a different or a diversified set of expertise that you probably yourself cannot bring on board. And one thing, I think this is something very important and very tough for most entrepreneurs: look for people who are smarter than yourselves, because that's when your company will actually flourish the most, because you need smart people who can challenge your thought process. That's where growth comes in. So I think, yeah, that's my suggestion.
Yes, very good suggestion you have provided. Thank you so much, Noreen. I would like to ask the participants if you have any questions or queries to our speaker, then you can ask in our question and answer session. So before to the question answer session, I have few more questions to you. Is that actually, as you have when you have started your company, definitely. So after making the product that you have an application, so how did you obtain your customers? Actually, what was your marketing tools or how you approached your customers so that they can come and use your application?
Well, so with us, we have very consciously tried not to go all out there with marketing, because we want to grow in a very calculated manner. But the marketing tools that we did choose was, so it's very important to understand the target segments that we are trying to provide these services for. And majority of them actually belong to low to middle income households. And they primarily a lot of them belong to peri-urban areas as well, but at the same time we're trying to target some rural populations too. And with the best part about Pakistan is that now we have 3G 4G coverage across 90% of the country. So we use a mix of channels, which included digital, which had Facebook, Google AdWords, and then we have been using a lot of SMSs, because that really works well for the kind of audience that we're trying to target. And very very initially, we tried with some A/B testing with radio as well, but I think the impact of radio is very difficult to assess. But yeah, so I think it's been a mix of digital marketing plus SMS and a bit of radio. That's how we've targeted them.
Thank you so much. Okay, as you have started your business, definitely it was not an easy path. So definitely there were some challenges you have faced. What were those challenges and how you have overcome those challenges? It would be an inspirational for our audience that they got to know, because we are from the same background. You are from developing country, we are also from developing countries. So our vision, mission and the challenges would be more or less same. So can you please share something about this?
Well, number one, Yuri, I think there's still challenges that I haven't been able to overcome. And I think every day there's a new challenge that comes up. But I think I'd actually break those challenges into two brackets. One of them would be the challenges that one confronts, while you're a woman in the field, where there are not a lot of women, particularly in this industry in Pakistan right now. And then there are challenges that that pertain primarily to the business itself. So if I am to talk about the business, let's begin with the business. I think the challenges here are more so to do with the industry and I think the regulatory space, because it's still very new. I think even the regulators are trying to understand this sector. So I think for us, if I go into the granularity of things, I think challenges have been more so around, how we can access, for example, different sources of data to even improve our credit decisioning. Because I think generally the incumbents, be it banks, telcos, they're very, very reluctant in sharing data. So I think that mindset shift is yet to come. So I think as an industry that we'll have to bring that mindset shift. But that's one challenge, and I think we're still trying to overcome that. Secondly, I think there have been challenges around, how we approach the credit bureaus, for example, in Pakistan. And I think that challenge, I think it's two-pronged. One challenge would be most on the financial literacy front, because I think that's, there's a long way to go when it comes to financial literacy. People are still becoming more digitally literate. And I think they're definitely more digitally literate than they are financially literate, because people definitely know how to operate a smartphone. When it comes to financial literacy, that's something that I think earlier entrants like ourselves have to really be very responsible about. And I think we have to focus on that, so that not only ourselves, but also the industry as a whole can benefit from it. So, that you have to start building that trust element, and also telling people what those financial services are all about, and what the implications are if those financial services are not used responsibly. So that's one challenge. And I think that will be ever evolving. It will take a few years, I'd say, for us to reach that point where we can actually work on that, get success over them. And then, of course, I think that these are more intricate industry level challenges, where you talk about KYC, you talk about centralized bureaus. So those are things that we're still working on with the industry players. So I think these challenges will continue, and every new day, we'll try to address them. But I think one of the major challenges that I really highlighted earlier as well was trying to raise funding internationally, because I think there's still not a lot of exits or case or success stories that we've heard from Pakistan. And I think to be able to get those eyeballs for Pakistan, we need to get a little more of that. But I think we will need some leap of faith from some investors coming in, and of course, we will need some more regulatory support for investors to be more comfortable with investing. So I think those are two-pronged challenges, and we are working on trying to, overcome them, or at least address some of the issues there. I come to the second bracket, which is that of being a woman entrepreneur. And I think, well, I personally am not sure whether I have faced any challenges on running my business in terms of, a fintech, being a woman. I think that responsibility and how you tackle issues really does come onto the person yourself. And what I've seen is that I think one really needs to understand that, and I think a strong woman is not born. I think a woman is made strong by the storms that she walks through. And you will see those storms every other day, where you will have, I call this a subtle art of undermining. And you see that a lot, not only in, underdeveloped and developing countries, but I think this is all around the world. And that does come in from men from various factions. I wouldn't say my team, because, I think they've seen how I am, and I'm very, very vocal about making sure that, women point of views are heard, and everyone has their own opinion, and I think they're entitled to that. So you really need to make sure that your opinions are heard, but at the same time, I think it's very important to have informed and intellectual opinions. So many times I think what women might face and confront a lot is not being heard, or their opinions not being taken as seriously as a man's opinion would be. For that, I'd say, and this is what I try doing, is try to work hard on yourselves and try to equip yourselves with more intellectual capital. Because by the end of the day, if you if you know more and know better than anyone else, I think there shouldn't be any reason for people to not listen to you or not take your opinion seriously. So I think work on yourselves harder, put in that extra effort, because I think that's what women definitely have to do to make a mark. And I think they have to work harder than a man, because I think in the workspace, it's not about being a man or a woman. You have to be a man. If that's a challenge for you, then become a man, to face those challenges. So that's how it's been for me, and that's how I take it.
Excellent points you have said about this one. I would say that for the participants, that you have to be a strong woman. You should not feel like that you are not like a man. You cannot do something that they can do. But I would say that these are just equality. Okay, so you should not think that I cannot do impossible things, I cannot do technological things. That's the man's part. But you can see the inspiration in front of us. Miss Noreen Hayat has done this great job. Although the man-led society. Although she is a woman, still she has come out with lots of barriers. Now she is a successful woman right now. Hopefully she will be more successful in futures, and whatever she wants she can achieve those things. My next question from the audience is that so they wanted to know that already you have established your company. So definitely you had to actually hire some employees. So for fintech company or for any kind of technological company, what are the qualities we should actually know, or what we should actually keep to hire any employees for your company?
So I think for me, one of the most important aspects of running any company, whether it's fintech or not, is the HR the team that you build. Well, I don't know whether there's a formula to this, and I can only speak about what I look at, and what we value as stays. For us, number one, I think it's very important to have a cultural fit. So we really try to have multiple interviews. And if you, let's suppose you're talking about a tech position, we have interviews with the tech people who actually gauge their skills, which is of course going to be very important. At the end of the day, they have to be confronted with the challenges where they can perform. But then we have different sets of interviews, where we as co-founders are personally involved in interviewing, and I think it's very important. So I think at least for the first 100 to 200 people that we do hire, we want to be involved in the interviews ourselves, because I think that's where the culture of the company will be actually built. So I'd say that's very, very imperative. And we can only ourselves gauge that culture. And so I think those interviews are focused on that cultural fit. At the same time, I think for us, what we really look for is people who have an aptitude to learn and build themselves. Because I think this is an ever evolving industry, and every day, technologies are becoming redundant by the day. Every new day there's a new technology coming in. So you will need people who are self motivated enough to learn themselves, because at Taze, what we can proudly say about is we provide a platform to people to learn, and it's an open environment where we actually value, and we do try to encourage a lot of growth through learning themselves. So that's another thing that I'd say, that try to gauge whether that person has that aptitude. And I think by the end of the day, of course, the kind of people with the credentials or the qualification that people bring in does matter a lot. For fintechs, it's tough because, at least if I talk about Pakistan, if you are to get local talent, some of the I think in technology development, we've done fairly well, because we have a very, very good stack, a good uh, you know um, pool of people within Pakistan who can develop technologies. But the challenges come around more so on the newer technologies that are more to do with artificial intelligence or data science, where there's still not a lot of people that you can find. So I think that's where I think that's the advantage of having a global economy and connections. We can actually look for remote teams. So yeah, I think that those are a few that we look into, and for us, that's what stands out.
Thank you so much for this important information. Last question I want to take from the audience is that, as you are the startup from the fintech company, so what do you think? Which funding is appropriate for the startups in the technological company? Because we know that there are some venture capitalist company, those will be asking for equity sharing or angel investment, equity sharing. So equity sharing is good for startup, or any other funding sources you would recommend?
So I think again it depends on countries. For example, in Pakistan, so we are a financial institution that's registered in Pakistan, and for us, we have some challenges and some requirements around making sure that the funds that we raise are for solely equity, because we have some capital requirements as well. But if you are to talk about fintechs that otherwise are starting off, do not have license requirements, I think it's number one, if you are still trying to see still, depends on the stage of the company. If still, trying to develop, let's suppose an MVP, or if it's a proof of concept, try to bootstrap as much as you can. You know, friends, family. So I think that's maybe the best route to begin with. Once you've actually got onto your next round, where you start raising funds from investors, and I think those investors can be angels. VCs are a tough bet for startups, but I think convertibles are actually the right way to go about, um, because I think it's very difficult for newer companies to set valuations. So I think convertibles are an easier way where you can actually retain your equity, and at the same time maybe build your platforms to a point where you can then be better geared to put an evaluation to the company. But again, I think convertible stories are easier where you have regulations around convertibles. Pakistan, for example, has been very new to it, and there's still regulations that are coming around convertibles. For example, you have SAFE. That's a very very common instrument that's used in most parts of the country for earlier stage companies, and even Series A onwards. You do see companies coming in with SAFEs. So I think for younger startups, definitely that's the way to go. Bootstrapping, convertibles, and of course, if you have reached a certain point, then equity. For us, for example, we've actually raised funding through a mix of debt and equity as well, because we happen to be a lending financial institution. So it's more real for us because we don't have in a lot of ways the leeways of being a startup, because I think being a financial institution doesn't give you that liberty. So that's how it's been, and that's my suggestion.
That's come to the end of our question answer session. Thank you, Noreen Hayat, for giving us your so valuable time, and you have shared so many important information and your startup journey with our audience. Thank you so much. Any final remarks would you like to say to our audience so that they can learn something and they can follow your footstep as well?
Well, thank you ever so much, Yuri, for giving me the opportunity to be a part of such a dynamic Congress of Women. I'm really humbled. Thank you. But I think one thing that I would give an advice that I would give is, this is something that I hold really closely to myself. It's this saying by Winston Churchill, and he said, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." So I think we should all just try to work hard and never lose hope, and just keep working toward that purpose that we've set our eyes on. By the end of the day, that's all that matters.
Thank you, Noreen. Thank you so much. Basically, I have learned a lot from you today because you know that most of the starters come and they want advices, and your advices, your information would be helpful from them for them. So thank you so much, Noreen. We are really honored that you have joined us today. Hope to have you in our future as well if we need anything. And if our audience need to contact with Noreen Hayat for any kind of collaboration or something like that, they are open to it. And thank you so much. Hope to see
Thank
you
you.
in our next program as well. So bye.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye.